Stillwater was a small, forgotten town nestled deep in the heart of rural America. With a population barely reaching a few hundred, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and secrets. The town's charm lay in its simplicity, a single main street lined with mom-and-pop shops, a diner that served as the social hub, and a church that stood tall at the edge of the town. Life in Stillwater moved at a leisurely pace, with the biggest excitement coming from the annual Harvest Festival. But beneath its serene facade, Stillwater harbored a chilling legend that the townsfolk rarely spoke of: the legend of the shadows. The story dated back to the early 1900s when Stillwater was a bustling mining town. Back then, the town thrived on the rich veins of coal that ran beneath it. The miners worked long, grueling hours in the depths of the earth, their faces perpetually smeared with coal dust. It was a dangerous job, but it was all they had. Life was hard, but the community was close-knit, bound together by their shared struggles and joys. One fateful day, a group of miners uncovered something deep within the mine, an ancient, hidden chamber. Inside, they found strange carvings on the walls and a peculiar black stone altar at the center. The miners, curious and desperate for any distraction from their toil, began to explore the chamber. They didn't understand the significance of what they had found, nor did they heed the warnings etched into the walls in a language long forgotten. That night, the first of many inexplicable tragedies struck Stillwater. John Carter, one of the miners who had discovered the chamber, was found dead in his home, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of terror. The doctor couldn't determine the cause of death, and the townsfolk whispered of a curse. Over the following weeks, more miners met similar fates, their bodies discovered with the same look of abject horror. Fear gripped the town, but the mine was the lifeblood of Stillwater, and the mining continued. Those who survived spoke of seeing shadows moving in the darkness, shadows that seemed to follow them, whispering their names. They called them the shadows, malevolent spirits released from the ancient chamber now haunting the town. As the death toll rose, the town's elders decided to seal the chamber, hoping to contain whatever evil they had unleashed. The entrance to the mine was collapsed, and the town tried to move on, but the damage was done. The mine closed, the population dwindled, and Stillwater became a ghost town in all but name. Decades passed, and the legend of the shadows faded into memory, a tale told to scare children on dark, stormy nights. But some remnants of the past refused to stay buried. In the late 1980s, a new family moved to Stillwater, hoping for a fresh start away from the bustle of city life. The Andersons bought an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, unaware of the town's haunted history. Sarah Anderson was a writer, and her husband David was an artist. They had 2 children, Emily and Jacob, who quickly adapted to their new, quieter life. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. The farmhouse was spacious, the town was quaint, and the surrounding countryside was picturesque. But as autumn set in, strange things began to happen. Sarah started noticing shadows in the corners of her vision, shadows that seemed to move on their own. David dismissed her concerns, attributing them to her overactive imagination. But soon the children began to complain of the same thing. Dark figures watching them from the corners of their rooms, whispering their names. One evening, while working late in her study, Sarah heard a faint whisper. It was so soft that she thought she had imagined it, but then she heard it again, clearer this time, a voice calling her name. She turned around, but the room was empty. Shaking off the unease, she tried to focus on her writing, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of the mine, of the chamber, of the shadows. Terrified, Sarah delved into the town's history, uncovering the old legend of the shadows. She learned about the miners, the chamber, and the tragic deaths. The more she read, the more she realized that the shadows were real and that they had returned. She tried to warn David, but he was skeptical. It wasn't until Emily and Jacob began having nightmares and waking up with inexplicable bruises that he started to believe. Desperate to protect their family, Sarah and David decided to seek help from the town's remaining elders. Old Mr. Hargrove was one of the few who remembered the stories firsthand. He had been a boy when the mine was sealed and had heard the whispers of the shadows his entire life. He told the Andersons that the only way to stop the shadows was to confront them in the chamber, to seal them away once and for all. With Mr. Hargrove's guidance, the Andersons ventured into the woods to find the old mine. It was a treacherous journey, the path overgrown and forgotten. As they approached the collapsed entrance, the air grew colder and the whispers grew louder. It took hours of digging, but they finally cleared enough rubble to enter the mine. The darkness inside was oppressive, the air thick with dust and decay. armed with flashlights and a sense of dread. They made their way through the twisting tunnels. The deeper they went, the stronger the presence of the shadows became. They reached the collapsed chamber entrance, the carvings on the walls glowing faintly in the dim light. Sarah recited an incantation she had found in an old journal, a desperate attempt to banish the shadows. As she spoke the ancient words, the shadows grew restless, their whispers turning into anguished screams. The ground shook, and the chamber walls seemed to close in around them. A blinding flash of light, the shadows were pulled back into the chamber, the screams fading into silence. The air grew still, and the oppressive weight lifted. They sealed the chamber entrance once more, hoping that this time it would be enough to contain the evil within. The Andersons returned to their farmhouse, exhausted but relieved. The whispers stopped, and the shadows were no longer seen. Stillwater slowly began to heal. The town's dark past finally laid to rest. The Andersons stayed, becoming a beloved part of the community. Their story a reminder of the thin veil between the ordinary and the supernatural. Years later, as the town prepared for another harvest festival, the legend of the shadows had become just that, a legend. But every so often, on dark, stormy nights, the townsfolk would swear they could hear faint whispers carried on the wind. A chilling reminder that some evils are never truly vanquished, only contained. Also, in the end, just don't forget, it wasn't just a puppy, so you better click that subscribe button.